I'm Tina Axelrad. I'm the zoning administrator for community planning and development in Denver, which just means I have the privilege and joy of overseeing all the permitting of new development, inspection and enforcement under Denver zoning rules. Alek is a senior city planner in our zoning admin group, and his role here, as he said, is to manage this bundle of text amendments. You'll hear it referred to as the bundle because there's over 130 changes to the code going forward to council. We do this every 2 to 3 years as primarily catch the code up with reality as well as correct mistakes and make things more clear, do some minor shifts if things are supported by policy but are out of whack, and some of that is in the bundle. And one small part of the bundle is what we're going to talk about today, which are changes to the rules and regulations for Denver's carriage lots. So we've got a brief agenda. We're going to talk about, just to get everybody on the same page and make sure we all know what we're talking about. We've got great pictures and maps because planners love maps. What is a carriage lot? Where they're located? You will get the answers to those questions. What development can happen on a carriage lot today? I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding on what is allowed today versus what will be allowed if this bundle text amendment gets adopted. So we'll get into what is changing and why, and then there should be plenty of time for questions. Okay, at this point, let's move on to that burning question. What is a carriage lot? And granted, it's a unique piece of land. There's not that many of them, which we'll see shortly. But this is a piece of land that is typically on a square block in Denver. This land is typically in the middle of the block, surrounded by 4 public alleys. And that's important. There's a lot of weird lot patterns in Northwest Denver where there's land tucked really far deep into the block, but it's not surrounded by public alleys. You just have very deep lots because sometime in the past, there probably were alleys platted and they got vacated, which is a technical legal term for asking the city for permission to not have it be a public alley anymore. And then it becomes part of someone's private land. But we are talking about the subset of just a piece of land surrounded on all 4 sides by public alleys, not private driveways. And the name actually means something. Historically, these were platted literally in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And that's where we parked our carriages. And maybe there was a barn or a structure there to park the carriages in, maybe not. The key difference between other pieces of developable land in Denver is that it doesn't have frontage. It doesn't abut or touch a public street. And by a public street, that would be a named or numbered street in Denver. So let's take a look about where they are. Okay. There's not that many carriage lots. This is not the number of blocks. This is the number of carriage lots. 36 carriage lots. You can see them sprinkled about the city. Now, the carriage lot is different than an assessor's parcel. And usually this blows people's minds. I don't know why. But a parcel is just a tax, a defined piece of land ownership for taxing purposes. So the carriage lot just describes a piece of land. It's just a name we gave it. We could have called it banana, but we called it carriage lot, and that's the land. You can have 1, 2, 3, none parcels on a carriage lot. Parcels usually signify ownership because as an owner, you have the privilege of paying property taxes to the city of Denver. Thank you very much. So there's 54 parcels contained on those 36 carriage lots, which means some of them are in multiple ownership. You might not realize that in Northwest Denver, but when you look at the carriage lots in South Park Hill, you'll see they've been chopped up into multiple owners. So there'd be 4 parcels on a carriage lot, not as typical in Northwest Denver. Now, according to our Denver County assessor who collects the taxes on all pieces of private property, there's only 7 completely vacant, no improvements carriage lots left. So if you're the lucky owner, you're in a very small class. Now, that could mean there are some improvements. They might be pretty minor. It might be a shed or a small garage, but it might not be a house. And, this is just the assessor records. We did not go out to all 37 and take a survey. Maybe some of you can share what you have on your carriage lot if we have some people here, and make sure you're appropriately categorized for paying your taxes. Now, all of these carriage lots are located in low-density residential zone districts. These are zone districts that typically allow just single-unit dwellings, a structure with one dwelling unit, one household living in it, or two-unit zone districts. The TU is two-unit, SU is single-unit. Two-unit will allow you 2 units in a structure, a duplex, or a tandem house where you split the structures into split the units into 2 separate structures. I'll pause. Everyone still with me? Okay, for those in the room, and maybe we can try, I'm not quite sure how it would work for those virtual, maybe you can do the react button and float a heart up. I want to get a sense of who's in our audience. So we're gonna take a little break, and I would like all of you to raise your hand if you own a carriage lot in Denver. 1, we have 1 person. 2, where's 2? Okay, keep your hand up. We're not done with you. 2 people in the room at Merrick House who own carriage lots. What neighborhood, sir? Lower Highlands? What neighborhood, sir? Sloan's Lake. Okay, now keep those hands up if you own a carriage lot. Put up your other hand, assuming you have another hand, if you also maintain a primary residence on the block. Look at that. All right. You can put your hands down. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you do not own a carriage lot, but live on the same block as a carriage lot. Okay, a lot more hands just went up in our room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 8 people here in the room at Merrick House. Now, please raise your hand if you don't fall into either of those categories, but you are just naturally curious. All right, we have a few people here who just want to know more. I love you. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. These next couple of slides just give you a little closer view, snapshots of some of the places. This is in Sloan Lake, where you can see some blocks between Lowell and Grove Streets, 23rd and 25th Avenues, where we have a little cluster of carriage lots. Keep going. The next one we'll show you is from Highland, another little cluster between West 33rd and West 36th Avenue, just east of Federal. You'll see 4 red lines there. Just to give you a flavor of what the land pattern is. The next one, we have a cluster along just off of West 38th Avenue between Zuni and Shoshone. And keep going. Now we're going to take a trip across town into South Park Hill, just north of Colfax, between Cherry and Dahlia. There's a small cluster of 2. Done. And finally, just for a whirlwind tour of Denver carriage lots, we end up just across the street from City Park and the Museum of Nature and Science, North Colorado Boulevard between 17th, or just east of Colorado Boulevard between 17th and Montview. There's a small cluster. And might be hard to see, but the red lines on this picture are parcel lines. So you can see in South Park Hill where we have as many as 4 parcels on one carriage lot, as I was talking about earlier. Okay. I promise I'm not going to talk too much longer, but it was really important, Alek and I felt, with all the public comments we got around carriage lots and the changes, that we want everyone to start with a basic understanding of what you can actually do today per the zoning code with your carriage lot. So those 2 folks in here who own a carriage lot, this is what they could do with it. Let's talk about use first. Then we'll talk about the building and how big it can be on a carriage lot. So for a very long time, until recently in 2010, and this goes back, we don't know the exact date when the zoning code gave some development rights to these odd lots called carriage lots, but it was probably, I'm guessing, sometime in the 60s or 70s. That would be 1960s and 1970s for those of you who were born after the year 2000. And it could only be used for vehicle parking and a garage, essentially kind of keeping the historical use. But there was a limitation that said, even if you're going to park vehicles on it, you had to be, the permit to allow vehicle parking had to be applied for by the carriage lot owner. And that carriage lot owner had to have their principal residence on the block surrounding the carriage lot. That sound familiar? Okay, that's been there forever, that limitation. Well, forever since we allowed development on carriage lots, which I'm thinking dates back to 1960s or 70s. In 2010, we updated Denver zoning rules and we expanded the type of uses that could occur on a carriage lot to include an accessory dwelling unit. And if you happen to own a house on the block, your primary residence was there, you could use your carriage lot for gardening and whatnot. I'm sorry, I have to get off of that. So an expansion, quite a significant expansion in use in 2010. We kept, the requirement came with it that to build an ADU, that permit applicant had to be the carriage lot owner, and the owner had to have their primary residence on the surrounding block. That brings us up to today as far as uses go. Let's talk about what you can actually build. What kind of structure can you build? How big is it? So of course you could build a garage and that might be smaller than what you see here. These are the limits if you wanted to build an accessory dwelling unit. A garage without a dwelling unit has a slightly smaller envelope that you have to stay within. But you're going for the max and you're meeting all the rules today. You can build a 24-foot house, 2 stories, no limits on going underground. If you want a basement, you can do that. There's what we call a bulk plane envelope, which is a 3-dimensional plane that comes off of the sidelines, and I'm using my hands because it's the best way to explain it. Comes up 10 feet or 12 feet, 45-degree angles. That becomes your building envelope. You can't poke out of that envelope. And that keeps the mass kind of towards the middle of the house. We do have a bulk plane. So again, that's a control on how massive or how boxy it can get. Now, unique to accessory dwelling units compared to if you wanted to build a house on the outside of the block, we have a maximum building footprint. Today, it's based on how big the carriage lot is, 7,000 square feet or less. You have a maximum footprint of 864 square feet. Now, there is no limit on the gross floor area of the use itself inside the building. This is just where the bottom of the structure hits the ground. You can have 2 stories. So you can have 864 plus 864. You can have a basement, 864, 864, and underground 864. So you can have a pretty good size house on your constrained footprint going up 2 stories. You get more footprint if your carriage lot is more than 7,000 square foot. But we're not going to let you build corner to corner. We have a maximum amount of building you can put on a lot. And this is true if you were building a house on the outside, on the outer ring of the block or on the carriage lot. Depending on the size of the lot, you max out at either 37.5% or half the lot. The coverage goes up as the lot gets smaller. Okay. Setbacks, that's the relationship of the building to the private property lines. These are minimums. Generally for a carriage lot, they're at least 5 feet from the boundary of the private property where it meets the alley line. Exception is if you're going to have a garage and take vehicle access off the alley, which is highly likely if you're going to build a house. We have to have enough maneuvering room from the doors of the garage to the opposite alley line of 20 feet. So you could end up with a setback, depending how wide the alleys are, of more than 5 feet. Okay, so that visualize the 2-story, it could have a basement, it could have an attached garage or a detached garage. That's what you can build today, pretty robust. It's an accessory dwelling unit. So it's a little smaller, a little tighter, a little more constrained in bulk and size than a full main house that you could build on the block. Okay. All right. All the zoning code, not all, big part of what the zoning code does is give you the right to do something. That's called an entitlement. The zoning code says you own private property. We'll tell you the variety of uses you can do and the variety of structures and how big your structure can be. But that's the entitlement. The reality is you're going to hire someone to help you figure out how to build something on the lot. There might be constraints that prevent you from building to the max. And the city, you apply for a permit. I'm going to build an ADU on my carriage lot. I submit my permit electronically. I provide my plans. Just because you have the entitlement, you're not done. And for better or for worse, and I think generally for better, there's a gauntlet of city reviews that we're going to put that proposal through to make sure not only that you comply with zoning. All right, that use is allowed. Yeah, you're 2 stories. Okay, I see the setbacks. Check, check, check. You got to pass muster under our residential building code and fire codes. You have to provide sewer and water. So there's a lot of agencies who are going to be engaged in the review of your proposal. And that's what this slide is about. The second bullet talks about that multiple agency and multi-code review. Community Planning and Development Department in the city will check for compliance with zoning, building, and energy codes. So it's going to be efficient, it's not going to fall down on anyone, and it's going to meet the zoning requirements. Our fire department does its own independent review, and it's going to ensure that the building as it's situated and where it is, that they can get to it if there's an emergency. So they're going to look for compliance with minimum fire safety and access codes, because we do have quantifiable standards. How far can you be from a fire hydrant? That's a rule. You can't be more than 150 feet. That's as long as our hose goes. Okay. So they're going to be looking for that. They're going to be looking to make sure that there's enough room for their fire trucks to get to this middle lot in the middle of a block. So even if zoning and building and transportation says, yeah, we're all good with it. If fire says no, and we can't work it out between the owner and the fire department, you're done. You don't get a yes. You won't be able to do what you propose. So I need people to understand that just because zoning gives you entitlement, there's a lot more to it to actually build something and live in it. The other thing zoning does do, and I want to make this clear because I've seen some material floating around that suggests we're taking away any opportunity for neighbors to have some say or reaction to an application for development. So today, in our current state, when you apply to build on your carriage lot, doesn't matter what it is. It's a garden. Well, it's not a garden. You don't need a permit for that. But it's a garage or an ADU. Today, the zoning department will send out informational notice. And so what's that? That will describe the proposed use, have links to all the plans so people can find it. There'll be signs posted physically on the property because we have found that that's the best way for neighbors to find out because they're out and about and they'll see the sign. They're big signs, big, bright, orange. Can't miss them, hopefully. We will also mail notice to your city council office, the at-large city council members and any registered neighborhood organization where this land falls into their area of interest. So that's informational notice. And we give notice twice, not just once. We give it at the very beginning when we get an application, and we hold off on making any decision on the final decision from zoning on the application until there's a 45-day public comment period. And we invite, there's clarity as to where you send the comments on the sign and in the notice, and we get to consider those comments. If we see anything materially substantial that raises a concern, we can condition on the zoning permit anything we feel is reasonable to mitigate potential impacts, or we can work with our building or fire folks to ensure that. That's today. That's the requirement today. All right, we're going to move on to what's changing. So here's the list. Let's first maybe take off the table what's not changing. There's no change in density. Units per acre is density. You get 1 unit today, it's an accessory dwelling unit per, per whatever acre. Or I should say 1 unit per carriage lot, developable piece of it. That's not changing. You'll still get the opportunity if you own a piece of a carriage lot or an entire carriage lot to do 1 single unit. The size of the structure, that envelope I talked about, height, setbacks, footprint, that's not changing for what can be built on a carriage lot. That use review, that informational notice that every neighbor should hopefully see with plenty of posted signs, that's not changing either. So in the future, when development is proposed, informational notice will be given. That multi-agency in-depth review for safety, fire, sewage, water, zoning, building, energy, that's not changing. You'll still, better or worse, run the gauntlet when Dana here decides to build on his carriage lot. So what is changing? 3 things. First are the removed portions. Remember I said use is allowed and there's this limit on the use. To apply for the use of a garage or the use of a dwelling unit, the person who applies for the permit has to own the carriage lot. That's not that unusual. We usually require the owner of the land that's going to be developed to be the permit applicant, or maybe give agency to a consultant or an architect. But the kicker was that owner of a carriage lot also had to have their primary resident on the block surrounding. That is unique. We don't require that when you go to build a house on your land today in Denver. That's being removed. Now, to apply for a permit, you still have to show that you either own it or control it in some way. But it's the primary residence portion of that standard that we're suggesting be removed. At the same time, there was this rule on the back end when you got your zoning permit, congratulations, you ran the gauntlet, got everything you need. There is a little condition on the permit that said, and I'm picking on Dana only because I know his name and he introduced himself at the beginning and he raised his hand that he owned a carriage lot. It says, "Dear Dana, this permit is personal to you," which means we are issuing this permit just to you to build an accessory dwelling unit and occupy and build on this piece of land. Now, great. Dana doesn't care in the moment, can build his accessory dwelling unit. He has a residence on the surrounding block. What happens if Dana needs to move for his job? What happens if he wants to sell the carriage lot? That personal to the applicant puts a lot of constraint to whoever wants to do the same exact thing that Dana was doing with this piece of land, but it's the second person doing it, not the first person. We're suggesting removing so that when you get a permit, and this is true of virtually 99.9999% of zoning permits in the city of Denver, we don't care about the who. We don't care about your character. We don't care what gender you are, what race you are, whether you have money or not, you paid for your permit, you're good. We're going to get rid of this personal to the applicant, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and why. But those are the changes. There's a lot not changing, including pretty much what you can build and how big it is and basic bundle of rights. Let's talk about what we are changing a little bit more. All right. So why the heck would we remove the owner must have primary residence on the block requirement and a limit that the permit remain personal to the original permittee? First and foremost, as I said, this is a very narrow exception to the general, very small. I mean, this is it. There's no other thing like this in all of Denver zoning. But because it's there, it presents a barrier to opportunity for Denver residents. It closes the door to certain classes of people who could live or develop or build housing on this piece of land. And it's not that unlike other pieces of land in the city. So we look at this as the change is advancing a more equitable opportunities to access housing and to engage in development. As I said, zoning doesn't do a good job regulating who, and we've had a lot of missteps because we think zoning is the answer to every problem in the city of Denver, and it's not. There's other schemes if we want to regulate who and their character, and if they screw up, we can get to them, and it's called licensing. So your doctor is a licensed professional, your architect is a licensed professional, your contractor is a licensed professional. Zoning doesn't do a good job. We can never enforce it. It's very difficult to enforce. It's very difficult to administer. We catch it in a moment in time when you apply for your permit. So maybe we can check the box at the second you pull your permit, but then we lose track of you because most zoning permits get attached to the land, not to a person. And we really think this is reflective of a past in Denver. It's just been carried forward without question to now of an irrational bias. And what is that bias? We would suggest that, first of all, we can't even think of a rationale for assuming a carriage lot owner who lives on the same block generates a different or better outcome than if the owner lives off the block. We want to treat this piece of land, there's not that many of them, but there's 36 of them. We want to treat them similarly to other single-family, two-family zone land in the city, because this scheme, when it breaks, and we have seen it break on a handful of occasions, is a significant constraint on the transfer of real property in the city of Denver. And you can get sideways really fast if the ownership link or the primary residence link gets broken to the point that you might have a two-story structure there that you can't use or sell. And this has happened. Not once. More than once. Let's keep going. All right. So the other change you might have noted, it was in a happy blue, not red, because it wasn't being removed. It was actually being expanded. There's the first three other uses allowed today. Now, because we're suggesting and proposing to get rid of the link to primary residence, a dwelling unit, if we were to open it up to more Denver residents to live in or to buy and live in or to rent, just like you can do your house on the block, it can't be accessory anymore because that word accessory means there is a link to a primary use on the rest of the block. So we're not changing the envelope or the size or the type of house you can build, but we are changing the name. It's going to go, not only can you build an accessory dwelling unit, which means you have a primary house somewhere on that block, you can build a primary dwelling unit on your carriage lot, be constrained the same as that accessory dwelling unit would be, but we have to call it a primary dwelling unit. Again, no changes in density, no changes in size. It's just opening development and ownership to non-block residents. While we were at it, there was a case in Northwest Denver where Denver Urban Gardens started a community garden on a carriage lot that they did not own. And as a corporate entity, it did not have a primary residence on the surrounding block. Well, guess what I had to say to Denver Urban Gardens and the community? Sorry, not allowed. Go away. So in the spirit of we hope no harm, no foul, we're also allowing a primary urban garden. And this is a nonprofit. This is not a commercial farm. This is your Denver Urban Garden community garden. It has to be run by a nonprofit and it can't be commercial. So other than some, fruit stands and carrots, not like a full-fledged farm. So that is being added. I don't mention it much, but it's kind of a nice other thing we're doing. We hope that the community will welcome. And that is it.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Um,
How do we want to run this, Alec?
let's start with your question and I'll keep an eye on the Zoom for people in the chat with their hands raised.
I have a lot of questions, but I wanted to, before we proceed into future state, I want to kind of go backwards and look at the current laws and regulations and zoning. So we know that it says that no one outside the block can overbuild on a current carriage lot. That's the current state, correct?
Correct.
So what were the loopholes that were found that allowed a developer back in 2010 to buy the carriage lot for 6,000, flip it, put it on the market for 132,000, which prevented all of us in our block to actually purchase that to do a community garden? So I'm curious, like, where was the zoning?
So the zoning is a great question. Thank you. What's your name? Emma, and do you live on a block surrounding a carriage lot? Okay. Emma.
I'm just going to stop you, Tina. Can you please repeat the question from
Yes,
the
I was
room
going to.
before you answer that? Thank you.
Okay. So the question was, well, gee, if the current state is that to develop a carriage lot, the owner of the carriage lot has to have their primary residence on the surrounding block. How was it back in 2010 that on my block, a developer or someone came in, bought the carriage lot at a bargain basement rate of $6,000? And I assume this developer may not have had a primary residence on the surrounding, okay, and then flipped it and sold it for $135,000 to some unsuspecting soul. That is the essence of the problem. Zoning doesn't control real estate transactions. We don't get notice in the zoning department every time a piece of real property is sold. We didn't know. And if we didn't get a complaint about it to intervene, we'd never know. Now, when someone came in down the road after spending $135,000 for that carriage lot and applied for a permit to do something with the land, our residential plan review team is going to ask the question, show us evidence that not only are you the owner of the carriage lot, okay, got that, check, but you have a primary residence. So if the person who paid $135,000 for it can't show that, we have to say, sorry, don't even bother. Now, I don't know what happened to the person who bought it, but that's where the links to the chain get broken and cause real harm to unsuspecting people. Zoning is not the real estate purchase sale police. And that's why a regulation like this in the zoning code does not work, because we don't know when these things happen. We catch it. Maybe we'll catch that 2010 transaction today in 2024 when someone is ready to build on it. Could you imagine the shock and surprise of that owner, that they can't do anything with the land that they bought back in whatever for 135? I know you had more questions. Can we bounce around first?
Okay, so I saw Tripti had a question. Do you want to ask your question?
We'll go back
and then we'll alternate.
If you don't mind, I'm going to delay because my head is spinning with the amount of information you just gave, and I have so many questions. And I'm going to let other people go first, collect my thoughts, but I would like to come back later, and I'll raise my hand again. Thank you so much.
Okay, she's saying to come back to her.
Yeah, great. Can you tell us a little bit about where this change is coming from? Was there a motivating case or factor, or how did this come up for review? What's the history here?
Okay, good question. So the question was, what motivated this change in the code today in 2024? Did something happen? Was there a triggering event? I think the simple and short answer, even though I love long, deep, detailed answers that probably make Troopi's head explode, is the accumulation of all these missteps and mistakes and saying no and sorry, there's no way out, or, you know, people trying to figure out a way around it and finding a way that seems contrary to what the code says, but I can't say no because zoning doesn't have a hand in every transaction that has to do with real estate. So in summary, we had cases. I don't know if folks know about the saga of 2732 West 38th Avenue. Does that ring a bell for anyone? It does. Okay. Well, that saga is ongoing. It started in 2018, 17, when the carriage lot owner no longer lived on the surrounding block, but had a very nice story and a house structure on the ADU that he moved into and started living in. Now, was that legal under our zoning rules for him to be living in this structure that he built and owned on his carriage lot? The answer is no, because he didn't have a primary residence on the surrounding block. He broke that link, broke that chain. All right, so what does he do? We tell him he can't live there. He squats illegally, technically speaking, and then manages to accumulate all sorts of junk and things that get piled on the carriage lot, it became a neglected and derelict property, and that actually means something on the law. Charge him fines, took him to court. He asked for advice. How can he change the law or get an exception to allow him to just live in this, to make the structure a dwelling unit, follow all the codes? And we gave him the path. He chose not to follow it. We fined him some more, moved him out. It was a public health hazard. I have slides. I don't know if you want to see it, but Dodge Meadows, wherever you are. He still owns the lot, hasn't sold it, hasn't gotten permits to try to, there is a path to ask for some leniency. It's a long, hard path, and he wasn't equipped to hire someone to help him. He just owned this piece of land and can't do anything with it. That's story one. And then it was the accumulation of other similar stories, or just the what if. And even as recently as 3 days ago, we heard from Mr. Reed here about his dilemma, what he did with his carriage lot. And we would like to just take the opportunity while we're looking hard at our code and trying to align with equitable outcomes, which is a big deal in the city of Denver now. Put it through that lens. And we're making changes anyway to the whole code. Can we just take this out? Oh, and throughout the code, where we also had a has to be personal to the applicant, it wasn't just carriage lot uses, it was a few handful, maybe 4 or 5 other uses in the code. They're being stricken as part of this bundle of amendments too. So we're treating all uses that had that limitation the same in that regard. Carriage lots have that further unique primary resident attachment to it that nothing else in the code has like that. So we're just trying to bring this land. We are in a housing crisis. It's causing constraints on the use and development of a housing unit. Property that could take it is large enough. If they can meet that gauntlet of fire and water and other requirements, it's a housing unit. It's not even, it's a slightly smaller house. Maybe that's opens up an opportunity to buy something that's not as big. That's why we're doing it. We're looking at all those opportunities to open up opportunity. Reed, can you stand up? Mr. Reed?
We were not receiving Mexican restaurant is with the well right behind that. Feel free to go back. I bought this 7,500 square foot lot, so probably double the size of most homes lots that are there. On my lot is used to be single family house. Is now a I think 12 unit condo building, 4 ground cells, of which I have 2 of them. La Casita, a single family home that is about to be destroyed with a duplex being put up. Bunch of other duplexes, of which homes were all on the street. I had a guy named Reese who is building, he's a well-known guy, he's building the amusement park area that we're redoing all that. Came to me and said, look, my wife and I would love to buy your lot, single family home. We want to live in an urban environment, but we'd love it to be a little bit off the block. I said, that would be great. Bought the lot for $180,000, came to me, said, oh, they $860,000. Perfect. We walked in one single home. This is like literally around the block. They doubled the residency of the population. One single family home. I called up, I couldn't do it. This is 2021. I put over $40,000 into that lot, taking it from essentially getting garbage, literally. I put in grass and sod. I don't know how you do it in every garden, because most of them don't have water. To get water, it's gonna cost you $40,000 to do it. And so I've done my best. I've traveled 60 days a year, so far at least. I mow this thing every day. All I want to do, my dad's 82, I want to put a home or 2 homes back there. Just, they'll be fine. Let me give you some examples of things that have happened to me, because everybody sees these lots. You don't own them, so you don't see everybody's usage. I put $40,000 in landscaping and things down. My lot is now at park people's dogs. I have cameras, I watch them every day, come in, they let their dogs go and walk around. They urinate, they burn the grass, I don't care. I was out of town one day, and my brother, who lives next door to me, I got both brownstones, called me and said, hey, there's a ping pong table and a full-size air hockey table on your lot. And I said, holy cow, what the hell? He goes, yeah, someone just came and dumped it there. But great. 3 days later, I came home, full of up, dead grass, of course, under where they were sitting. I'm furious. Now here's where it gets good. I looked under and I saw a piece of cardboard. And I said, whose cardboard is that? There was an address on it. And I thought, the person that dumped it didn't realize that, and they pulled it off the truck. A piece of cardboard came down. You know who it was? So that's the second time that's happened. Of other things. Oil, gasoline. A guy pulled up and dumped some on the lot and just drove away. Another example, 4th of July. Guy has an Airbnb on the block. We're shooting off fireworks, right? Before I put all this money into this lot, it was literally a garbage dump, overgrown, full of it. The guy I bought it from had 2 Cadillacs that were dilapidated. And he goes, I go, why now? He goes, the worst I can make it look faster in the city. It probably wasn't wrong, right? But so here's the deal. These guys light off fireworks. These are the big ones that shoot out and explode. Right? One misfires, goes into my lap. Lights my grass on fire. Luckily, it's green because I put $40,000 into this lot to make it. Had it not, then the whole city block would be on fire. Because I put it out. And you know how I put it out? The water that I probably, unfortunately, illegally pulled from my house because I can't get water in from the ground. Now, here's what my point is, that people think that development of these lots is what's going to make things worse. It is development of the lots that's making them better. It is development of those lots that make people that live on them take care of it. I have to go mow that lawn. I do it 3 times a week. And my neighbors love me for it. But never once has one neighbor asked to mow the lawn. Never once have they come over and said, hey, that firework, that was scary, man. Everything gonna be okay? They don't care. They literally don't. I see it every single day. And so when I heard about this, and I appreciate the city going and talking about this, because the city's right. And unfortunately for me, I think they should take all of the restrictions off. My lot, I have 2 lots, one of the 7 that were undeveloped. There's actually a garage on there. And I can prove this. What it was used for before this was human trafficking. I am not kidding. And so I would love to tear that down, put up a duplex and be built. And it would make that lot, that whole area beautiful. This is mixed use on one side, a Mexican restaurant, condo buildings, all kinds of stuff. And these are antiquated laws. I can't do anything with it. So I promise you, I have over, at market value, $4 million of property on this block. It's in my best interest to make the thing better. I promise. And all I'm asking for is the city to say, wait a second, he's right. We can beautify these things, put 2 units, let the owners live all there, put their own beautification to it, their own landscaping to it, and everybody's going to be happy. And so I understand everyone's concerns, but when you own these things, it's not just about money for you. It is about beautifying the entire thing and making it right. But I own 2 brownstones. What am I going to do with 2 lots in the back? It doesn't make any sense. The best path of action is to have individual ownership. And I will tell you this, not all lots are created equal. There are some small ones, and I 100% get the idea of like, what the hell are you going to put over here? I get it. But that's where the basic, my mixed, or not my TU2, whatever zoning that the city gave me originally will solve the problem. You can only build on those lots. And so I'm passionate about this, but like, I've lived this for 5 years. I looked this morning, the first time I emailed you was March 3rd of 2022. I've been doing this for a long time, trying to get someone just to listen. So I understand you want urban garden. I understand everybody wants to do this. But what happens is when you have ownership, you realize that people think it's their property, it's their park, you're taking away their park. It's private property. And no one, look, I had people's dogs defecated. I brought this in. I put this up on my lot so that dogs would not go about defecating the lawn. You know, my neighbors did, they broke it. They took it in, they broke it, and they threw it away. They didn't stop. All the private property things, no one cares. So anyway, I appreciate the choir. I apologize for being passionate about this, but like the people that put their money where their mouth is and really beautify these things. I think Pat's saying this because, you know, I'm the one most law. I put 40 grand into this thing. I put a new roof on the garage. And believe me, without me, there's pictures, I think I said you, of what it looked like before me and what it looks like after me. And I urge you, go behind all the seat and look at it. That is not the way it was to be. I promise you. And there's dumping and all kinds of stuff continues to happen. And it shouldn't. That's just the no. What happened, compared to your story, my developer, so it was mixed use, right? So my ground cells are actually 50 feet tall. So even that's why because they're mixed use ground cells, so they're super high. My guy came in and said, hey, I bought all this property, these ground cells, and then we have this Carriage Lot behind it. He and his business partner did work out, and then he said, I said, hey, I'll buy it. Yeah, I'll buy it, and then I had heard more about it after I bought it. But I couldn't, do you want it? But I'm only asking for a equal fairness of the law, right? That's all I'm asking for. All the laws, all laws are the same. Everybody that had sold their home on the lawn that got demolished and the duplex got built, they didn't take it, right? They sold it, and no one came and said, you can't do that. You can't sell this thing. On my word, $1.2 million they wanted. And it's right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Excuse me. Excuse me. I know. Excuse me, we have people with their hand up in the chat who want to answer questions. Please respect the flow so that other people will have a turn to state their question. And I think we're going to go to virtual next.
Okay, Keith, thank you for being patient. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. And I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your name of the gentleman that was just speaking, but I think that your passion is evident. And I feel that, you know, people are passionate about this issue. And I think that kind of gets to my main concern, which is, you know, this is a very heated issue. And I think the city has known that people have strong feelings about carriage lots for quite some time. I'm curious why we're having a meeting about this a week before the bundle package is set to go before the planning board. You know, we sent a survey around to lot owners, which I believe is how a lot of the people here know that this is actually happening. So I'm curious why the city or why the planning department, you know, hasn't done more outreach until the week before these bundle amendments are going before the planning board. And, you know, the survey that we have, you know, I think it's pretty evident, you know, 91% of respondents said that they thought community support was necessary with the development, or community input, I should say, not support, community input was necessary. 94% of the respondents that said that, you know, community input should be gathered before carriage lot changes are made. And so I guess I'm wondering how this is coming about just a week before the bundle package is going before the planning board, and why there wasn't more community outreach done on this issue before. I mean, I think, Tina, you have a lot of opinions of what you think the code should look like, but I mean, those are opinions that, you know, are yours. And there's 14 people in the room and 10 people on this call that have other opinions about what they think should be done with these carriage lots, and they should have input in this process. And I'm wondering why we're just getting kind of a lecture here towards the end, and kind of an informational session and not part of this conversation. I don't think, there's a lot of people that want, really trashy pieces of property to sit behind their house. But I also think that, this is what community conversations are about, and trying to figure out something that works for a lot of different people. And I guess I'm just curious why we're having this now.
You want to take a crack at that first?
Sure. So thanks for that question. For anyone that couldn't hear, I apologize for the speaker system situation. Keith is asking why the city has not done more outreach and why this meeting is occurring at this late hour before the planning board. And I think it goes, so on the one hand, this is part of community outreach. We are here to listen. We did hear your comments. And then I will also say that when the changes are relatively technical, like the ownership requirement and a requirement to live on the block around, I'm curious what would be different about that for you, Keith, or anyone else in the room?
Well, I will just say my opinion of this.
Mhm.
And again, this is my opinion, is that I think for the people that I know that live around a carriage block, that most of them probably when they moved into their home inquired about what was going on with the empty lot behind them, or, what's the ownership level of the lot behind them. And I think most people, if I know, the people that are around my block, either got some, probably something from the realtor or something that said, that passed on some information, or you have to be a, contiguous lot owner to develop that piece of property. I know that a lot of people on my block, for instance, looked into purchasing the carriage lot that was behind our property. There was even people that looked at owners on our lot that had the fire department do an assessment of, or inquired somehow with the fire department, the fact that they couldn't get a fire truck back there and that the lot was undevelopable. I mean, so I would imagine that most people that are making an investment in their home are inquiring what the status of the piece of property behind them is. And so I think a lot of people made large financial decisions based on, what their interpretation or what they heard about this, piece of property in their backs or, behind them. And I think that their opinions count and they matter. And I think that this process has really kind of not allowed those opinions because maybe they disagree with your opinions. And I think that they should be involved in the process.
Thank you for your comments. I want to assure you that we published the public review draft on July 9th. And even before July 9th, I shared with certain block owners that this was coming and gave them a heads up. I wasn't trying to hide anything. There was an active engagement of one carriage lot owner with the residents around their block because that link had been broken and the owner was seeking a way to build a single family home on their lot. And the council office and myself held up a process in the city to give him a chance to talk to his neighbors and see whether they can broker essentially an agreement for them to go ahead, even though he didn't live on the block, to build a house for his family and live in it. So when I went to the neighborhood meeting on that, in all transparency, I said, hey, here's what the rules are today, but we're about to release a draft that will change that, or we're thinking about changing that. The draft came out July 7th with that heads up to at least one block owner. The council office knew about it as well and was getting the word out. So we received a lot of comments on the carriage lot change. And they were long emails, very detailed emails. We read them all, we swear. We read them all. We looked at it. A lot of the concerns were projecting into the future about if something were built, how could it be safe? How could it happen? And it may be, it might not, because you can never get fire vehicles back there. We don't know the answer to that because that's a very site-specific question. But in general, The comments weren't about concern about more change or a very big difference in the law. It was about, well, what if someone wants to build there and the fire truck can't get there, or can't get a water line there, or I can't get into my garage? We're going to look at all that. We're not going to constrain anyone from getting into their garage if a new house is built on a carriage lot. The other thing was a bias in favor of the owners, a very clear comment that we prefer that someone on the block control and own this property. That was clear in the comments. And we respectfully read it and disagreed that that's a policy we want to continue to embed in our zoning code. So we are going to continue to bring it forward. It's not that we didn't hear you or didn't hear your concerns. We hope to answer some of the concerns with the presentation tonight. We're open to a continued dialogue. You're welcome to come to the planning board hearing. It's a public hearing. They make a recommendation. We are just starting the adoption process. All we have right now is a draft for planning board that's been posted on our website. They get to take the bite of the apple and hear testimony as well. The community outreach, because we're not changing the overall density or intensity of development, you're right, Keith. We did not get in front of this in terms of proactively setting up this forum in July. We responded to questions in writing. Honey wrote in, I think we responded to them. Other people we responded to in writing if they sent us an email. We've briefed the council office so that they can help us answer questions as well. I think for this type of change where we're not changing density, this is not missing middle housing, which you might hear about in the community. That's about taking our single family zone districts, which many of you live in, or 2-unit, and saying, you know what, instead of 1 unit, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. I don't know. Let's talk about it. That's not this. It's still 1 dwelling unit. It's just called primary instead of, says there's still the same household living in it. What's breaking is that link that you have to be. Now, you had an opportunity for a while there. We get it. Rights change. Zoning rules change. Zoning rules are allowed to evolve over time. So something that was in play when you bought your property and the rules change, and you say that's not fair, it does feel not fair, but it happens all the time. It's zoning. It's not a God-written right that never changes. So we're sorry if you had the opportunity or thought that you could buy your carriage lot and maybe now you won't because its value might increase because you could build a house on it. You'll have as fair an opportunity to buy that piece of land as anybody in the city of Denver.
Okay, we've got a couple questions in the room. Saw you first.
Some of the carriage lots are historic districts, like the appropriate districts here. How have you had conversations with landlords to make sure that anything that gets built there will meet their restrictions and guidelines?
So great question. Some of the Highland carriage lots are in historic districts, historic preservation districts, and there's a whole nother code that tells you what you can and can't build and how it looks when you're in a landmark district. And those would apply at the time that you submit for your permit to build something. The first bite of the apple would be landmark, because if you can't get past landmark, don't even bother with anyone else. So that would happen as part of that interagency review.
Just curious, because there's different restrictions for like things that are visible from the street.
You're right.
So
You're right. And I imagine landmark will take that in consideration. The point was there are different landmark design standards, whether the structure or your building or your addition can be seen from the public streets. And if a carriage lot obviously is tucked in the middle, you might have freer reign in terms of meeting those design guidelines than if you were a building on the public street. I could imagine that to be a likely scenario.
I think our concern would be more in the direction that we would be concerned about any new development, you know, kind of impinging on.
Yeah.
Historic.
They'll still review it. Again, compatibility is what drives landmark design review. And because it would be a house as opposed to just like a garage, I think it would still get quite a lot of review and scrutiny.
And definitely your bulk plane, right? Because it's another concern. We have, all of our houses are.
One
they're a lot smaller.
Yeah.
right?
So that would be something Landmark could opine. Landmark can go more restrictive than zoning. So in a lot of zones with historic districts, the zoning might say you can go to 3 stories or 2.5 stories. And through Landmark, if the established pattern is something less, they can bring it down because that's what's most compatible.
Okay.
Have any in the virtual room?
Just want to repeat there was a follow-up question about bulk plane, just so the people online can hear, and that's what
sorry.
Tina was responding to.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, thank you for here. I have kind of one comment and then a question. The comment is, I agree with Keith that you guys should increase hold on it, and on, at that time, back in July, the person who didn't see me. I don't know the pictures, I don't know the pictures you can see, probably better, but then I'd have a better idea of how my community really feels. I found out about this 2 weeks ago, and I really don't have a clue how the people feel. That are around them, and there's about that. I'd like to know, but I don't.
Okay.
And that's just the comment.
Can I repeat it really quick, just so
Sure.
everyone online can hear? So remind me of your name?
Shane Sutherland.
Shane says that he would have liked more outreach, agrees with Keith. And if we would have done better outreach in July, he would have known more what his neighbors and folks in his neighborhood would have thought about it by now.
More specifically, you have to notify our owners on certain changes in zoning.
And-
You-
right.
You didn't, you said the bundling one, you didn't really say, oh, the carriage lots are changing.
Mhm.
Because there's not that many, pointed out, there's only for some carriage lots in Denver, it would make it that much. Just to send out probably 5 RMOs, an email would have done it, and now I'm getting to my question.
Okay.
Since there's a move to make everything ADU, and once you move these carriage lots kind of standalone, will they're primary now will they have ability to create an ADU on their own?
Great question, Jean, or sorry,
Shane.
Shane. I don't know where that came from. So Shane asked, all right, if this goes forward and now you have the right to build a primary dwelling unit on a carriage lot, does that come with the other zoning allowances that would give you the right to have an accessory dwelling unit with your primary dwelling unit? The short answer is no. We take that right away in the proposed changes in the bundle of amendments. No, you just get your primary. You do not get the right to do an accessory dwelling unit with your primary on a carriage lot.
There's
So
a-
you get 1 unit only. Yep, no, it's a good question.
Okay, I saw 2 more hands in the room and I don't see any online, sir.
So whenever somebody goes and builds on, these lots, they're surrounded by a bunch of garages. Tight alley here, so that's all there was no anything about maintaining 20 feet of, a new structure. But is there anything in the code that talks about maintaining clearance around the structure? So I know where I live, the alleys are 12 feet, their standards 20 feet, right? So
16.
16.
but yeah, only 20 feet.
13
now.
to
So when you redevelop, you have applications and some of the districts. So I guess my question is, somebody comes in, they take their 5-foot setback, whatever, but is there anything in the zoning code that says they have to maintain footers around existing structures, or are we gonna have people build right up and not be able to maneuver?
So, so the question was, hopefully we'll be able to rephrase this. Is there anything in the zoning code that protects existing structures
Like existing garage.
or existing garage clearance or for structures that are already built on the block that also share these alleys that a carriage lot would be, also sharing, be one more house using the alley. So, in zoning, we have that minimum face to alley line rule, but that's just zoning. This is going to be looked at by our professional transportation plan reviewers. to ensure that if there's going to be a substantial adverse impact to use of the alley by existing structures, that would have to be mitigated most likely by the carriage lot owner. Either dedicate another foot or two around your carriage lot so we can get the alley width sufficient. If you really want to build a house there, that could be a barrier that someone says no thank you to, or they do. That's mostly in our Department of Transportation's rule books. So the zoning will set a basic setback, but that's just a minimum for zoning purposes for spacing and basic maneuverability on the private property to get from the alley to the new garage on the carriage house. The look at what the existing conditions are and the impacts on those would be done by our transportation plan reviewers. And they would have comments, and the applicant, the developer, whoever, would have to respond and show how it maintains the level of service that's acceptable and safe.
We've heard from Keith already, so I'm gonna go to the person in the back, and then we'll go back to Keith after that. Yes.
Sort of follow up on what this question was, if most of the alleys are 12 feet or less, some have 4 ways in, some have 2 ways in. I'm assuming the city transportation will figure out if we're gonna make those one way, how they're gonna do that. But with that in mind, how does the utility corridor work? Like our carriage lot that we back up to has no, utility, no sewer, no electrical, no nothing. So how will somebody, do they have to buy utility corridor to come from the street down an alley? And then who owns the alley for that? Does that private property owner then have to buy an easement to bring that electrical or utility down the alley?
Yeah, here's where, as a zoner, you're getting into territory that's a little bit outside my comfort zone, but I can assure you that will be looked at. Yes, you cannot build a house in the middle of a block without utilities, sewer, water, basic electricity. And you're not using or leaping from an existing parcel to yours. So you got to do it all on your own. It's not an easy thing. But yes, you will need to do that and show how you do it and show that you meet all our codes and you're placing them in an easement or in an existing easement, or you're creating whatever it takes, that will be addressed.
A utility corridor down an existing alley.
Zoning has nothing to say. She asked about whether zoning allows a utility easement or a utility branch running through an alley to get to the carriage lot. And
Public right.
can I? Yeah.
So as long as the utility hall is allowed to be, right away.
Right. So I was just going to say, Tim, thank you. I'll work your answer in. The alleys are public right-of-ways. Zoning does not apply to an alley. Let's get that straight. Zoning is only concerned about private property. So the public right-of-way is controlled by our Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. It's DOTI, Transportation and Infrastructure. So, and they work with Excel and Denver Water to figure out, this is beyond me, how to get utilities to someone who needs them. And it either happens or it doesn't. That's all I can say. I know.
So you
So someone who has run water to their carriage lot said that it had to come from the street and run perpendicular to hit the carriage lot. And if you can't make that happen, you're out of luck. Now, if it's an accessory dwelling unit, Denver Water and some others might allow you to tranche off of the primary unit. So that's a benefit to doing an accessory dwelling unit on a carriage lot that might still, move people to do that if someone who owns it can't build a house on it.
We can just run one straight.
We have a handout.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, guys, we're gonna get back to our hands up approach, and we've got 3 in this room and at least one in the virtual living room. And I would like to give new voices a chance. And I see one person who hasn't asked a question yet. Is that true? Did you ask a question?
I think she.
Oh,
Concerned that the towns are not on the main street. Does the post office really?
post office she asked if there was any concern from post office about an address or a house that's in the middle. No, the simple answer is no. We get to you. The post office will get to you. There's an address, they have it on their map, they will get to you. ADUs that are in the rear of an existing house, sometimes pretty deep, have a half address, like 39 and a half is the ADU. The post office gets them their mail, and the firefighters get to them too. I'm sorry, I'm trying to speed up a little bit because we've got like 5 minutes left and there's still hands up.
Also, if I understood correctly, it sounds like you spoke to one block. If that's the case, like our voices were not heard, that is more consulting. So it sounds like what we can do about it now from here, because we're at this point, is there is this planning board hearing you mentioned. So my first question is when is that and where?
It's so she's asked how to have their voices heard if they were not involved earlier. She's asking when the planning board is going to be held, and that's October 16th at 3 p.m.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday afternoon. It's held at, you can send written comments as well as the peer. And we'll get written comments to the planning board this week if you get it in. And then I don't know what happens after that.
After that, Fran sends them. So you can send written comments to me. My name is Alek Miller. I've been on all the invites. And I'll provide all the written comments received so far to the planning board as a part of the packet. And Keith, I know you're waiting, but we have a couple new folks with hands up, so we'll loop back around.
I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Sorry, we had a.
No, the maximum for a structure that has a dwelling unit in it is 24 feet and 2 stories.
The same as the detached accessory structure dwelling units.
Whether it's ADU or house.
So if right now, or after this passes, if a carriage lot is built up as an ADU, the owner would have the option to do that. That's
Still,
correct.
yes.
At some point, could that be changed to a single family after it's built? And if not, how would you catch that?
Okay. So question was, if someone builds an accessory dwelling unit on their carriage lot and it's tied to a primary house on the block, could they someday convert it from an accessory dwelling unit, change the use is what we call it, from an accessory dwelling unit to a primary dwelling unit? The answer is yes, as long as that new use is allowed in the zone district, which it would be. And there's no other limitation, which we're suggesting there wouldn't be if this passes. Yes. So if someone owns the main house and accessory dwelling unit and no longer wants to deal with the accessory dwelling unit as attached to them, they could sell it to someone who just lives in it as their house.
Utilities have been attached to that other residence, which would then.
That I don't know. I'm sorry. So with a change of use in zoning, we would trigger other reviews that would be necessary. So so the utility question would have to be asked and answered if you pulled from the primary house. I'm not quite sure. It feels like you'd have to live on your own and not be attached anymore, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Keith, we're gonna go to Keith online and then.
Keith, do you have a question?
Yes, Lisa, I have a question.
Tina.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure as opposed to a comment, because we've got 3 hands here.
Right, I get it. I understand. I think I've let a lot of people talk. I've been nice.
Yeah, no, please proceed.
Thank you. I would just like to say that, I do think it for everybody in the room and everybody online, please show up next week on the 16th. I think your voices are important on both sides of this issue. And I think this conversation just shows that, there is a lot that still needs to get talked about on this issue. And I appreciate both of you, Alek and Tina, and anybody else involved from the city that have put this on tonight. But I do think that this is kind of an 11th hour attempt to do some information for us. I had a couple of other comments, but I will just ask a question here. There's reference in the near northwest area plan to the fact, and you both, or Tina, you referenced this in a conversation we had earlier as your, reasoning for some of the movement on carriage lots, that if there is mixed middle income housing that's put in, there's going to be community conversations around things like safety and neighborhood context and building within neighborhood guidelines. And when I've talked to staff about this, and I think you've said it tonight, that those are conversations around mixed middle income housing and putting more units on a carriage lot. But I guess my question here is, why doesn't that apply to us? Why doesn't that apply to there are multiple different sizes of carriage lots around the city. In Sloan's Lake, they're all about 4,500 square feet. So why doesn't Sloan's Lake deserve the same community conversations that, some of these areas with larger carriage lots that might get developed into multiple units have? I just think that, this seems like this is a broader conversation that shouldn't be, nipped in the bud after one meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Just to quickly repeat, more outreach, and he suggests that everyone who's here come to the planning board meeting on October 16th. And I'm sorry to cut that short, but I'm gonna go to
There's a gentleman who
oh,
has
I'm
a question.
sorry, you haven't asked a question yet. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I was wondering, if you take away the amount of the people that are around the carriage lot, and then according to this, it says a carriage lot expansion plan so that anybody can buy the lot, right? Well, that means anybody. So you get developers here. Here comes a Section 8 over here in my neighborhood, which my family has lived in the north side for 125 years in the same house and the same block for 125 years. Everything that the city starts to do, we get stuck with. When I was a little kid, we still had horses in the back of our property. I've got pictures of it if you want to look at it. There was horses back there. Then all of a sudden, the cars started coming in, and we don't like the smell of the horses anymore. So we had to get rid of all of our horses, our carriages, and everything else. Then I have a house that in 1969, Mayor McNichols and Tony Sepra, I think it is his last name, put alleys in, got grants to put alleys in around our carriage lot, right? Well, when they did that, the frames or the units that they used was for the 12-foot size alley. They didn't have any of them. That was for my alley was the right of way, and it was only 6 feet wide when I was a kid. They put in the alleys, and what did they do? They put the outside part of the frames and everything for the alleyway and attached it to my house. So every time a car goes down that alley, it tears my foundation apart. For the past 25 years, I've never been able to put anything into my house as an improvement because I have to redo the foundation underneath it every stinking year. And I'm getting tired of a lot of this stuff. And then the city says, well, you can't close that alley. I took it all the way to the Supreme Court, completely to the Supreme Court. the way they got rid of me, because it was just 3 judges, I had to pay $15,000 for this judge, $15,000 for this judge, $15,000 for this judge, and $250,000 was going to come out of my pocket. I don't make that kind of money. I'm on I make $247 a month. So I'm tired of being. That's all I can say. You know, so if they started leaving it where I sympathize with this guy. Really, I sympathize with him because I've been putting up with that stuff ever since I was born with my family. And I'm getting tired of it. They said, well, we can't get the fire trucks down the alley. That's why you can't close it. My alley is 7 feet wide. You're not going to get a 13-foot wide fire truck down the alley. And then when they did get a fire rescue truck to go down the alley, there was a mini home that was in there. And they had to come down and carry everything down there because there was some weird guy had died in it. And they had to take him out of the thing. So I'm getting tired of that type of stuff too, you know. But luckily, the man that owned the Carriage Lot, he lived in Iowa. And he was there for 48 years, sitting on it, because McNichols and Serpico wanted to change the law, the zoning what do you call it? Yeah, the name right now. But they wanted to change the name and turn all of the highlands into factories. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to take all of that down.
Sir, is there a question coming?
That's the
'Cause
question. Yes, but I'm just begging because the thing that with me, that's without having it hooked on to who owns it around. The next thing you know, somebody's gonna buy it and put in a section 8. I know that.
So your concern is noted that if we remove the ownership link to
Right.
someone who lives on the block, you're concerned about who might be able to develop it. It's okay. Some good stories there.
And you've been waiting so patiently. Thank you.
I just want to address. So you described the agencies engagement that have to go through it, and you described it as gauntlet. I just want to talk through the realities of what we're currently working through with someone that bought a Carriage Lot that does not live in the adjacent block. We've tried to come to a good neighbor agreement. They have 0 plans, yet the city has approved all of these different requirements, yet they don't have any plans. Not provide us any plans.
There are no plans for that
There are no
house.
plans for that house. So my question, this is my question / ask. With so many gaps right now, like when we ask very detailed and specific questions around very real things that could potentially impact the surrounding neighbors, such as water runoff, impacting foundation, utilities. It is very common in the summertime for our entire block to go out. So adding another person constraining that specific utility around our block has an increased rate of all of us experiencing potentially more outages. We have old people on the block, but as we know about the summers keep getting hotter, they're putting more people potentially at risk. There are just a lot of questions and details that no one can seem to give us an answer to, and that's why we just want to remove it from this bundle for now. We're not saying forever, but there needs to be more community input. There are over 1,800 residents that will be impacted by this. 1,800, if you take 36 lots and you just do some simple math, it's around 1,800. Am I saying if you average like 2 to 3 people per resident? We just need more time to get more people involved so more people's voice can be heard. And frankly, I'd love for broader, not just zoning, but I'd love for the city to weigh in on some specific restrictions that can be in place that would protect the homes of those that currently own. I think that's all we're asking for. We're not saying we're going to not do it forever, but this is all very rushed, in our opinion, because it's only been well known for the last 2 months.
Can I ask you a question?
You sure can.
Let me repeat your answer so folks can hear, or the question was more of a comment, I guess. Just concern again about not having more time, maybe it just needs more time and we can get to yes, that's great. I thank you for the optimism but the concern that, on a very specific site, one more house might make a difference. For example, in utility usage. If your neighbor tore down their house and built a new one, would you expect the same degree of scrutiny for that neighbor to build their replacement house? Well, that's what will happen when someone goes to build a house on a carriage lot. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Why do you say that?
Because when we ask for specifics of how they got approval, the specific plans, why they got approved by the fire department,
Give me, you know what? If you give me the address, I can look it up and look at the permit and review history and tell you how it got to yes, if that would be helpful. I'm not aware of which one you're talking about, so it's a little abstract to me.
My question is, how are there approvals when there were zero plans?
That's impossible.
So the owner has either lying to us or they.
I don't know what you're talking about. We're talking in very abstract. Hey guys, without an address or more specifics, I can't answer your question. It would be very strange for someone to have gotten, in fact, impossible for someone to have gotten permission to build without plans. That's impossible.
Can I have you email me?
If you send us the address, we're happy to follow up and let you know what the status is and what really is. There is a block, and I don't know if you live on it.
And in fact, that actually makes me more concerned because either they're lying to us.
They have applied for an request to vacate a public alley. That's the only official application that's in the door if we're talking about the same block.
And they've exaggerated what we by the city, fire, cell energy, and that's.
I don't know. All I can tell you is without a permit application, which we don't have for that particular carriage lot yet, what we do have is their request to vacate an alley. And that's kind of a loophole to get to building a house on that lot, because if it's not surrounded on four sides by alleys, it's not a carriage lot and it doesn't have these restrictions. And people have done it. Typically, you own the property on the street and you ask to vacate the alley between property you own on both sides. But people have figured out that maybe they can ask for an alley vacation without owning the other side. And what did they get? A weird piece of land that's not developable. It is developable, but it comes in under a different set of rules that could actually get you to a house, a primary house, without going through the rigmarole of the carriage lot. So we stopped that alley vacation request. Zoning administration and the city council office did not approve it. Now, we can't put a hold on it forever, which is why we sent them to the neighborhood to say, look, can you come to some agreement? Because ultimately, the zoning administrator cannot stop an alley vacation. City council can, but the zoning administrator can't. So I'm going to have to lift it. I put it on there to give people time to talk and maybe come to a mutual understanding that this could work for everyone, maybe, or at least talk about it. And that's where we are today. That's it. It hasn't gone any further than that. I don't even know what the status is. Did it? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we're at 7:10. We have one more question. Does everyone mind doing one more question and then
We'll stay.
we
We're
will,
happy
we
to
can
stay.
release you and say thank you.
Alek's gonna sleep over at my house because he lives in Lovell.
Yes, I'm
I can't afford Denver.
Especially given the neighborhood, people add to their house for the size of their house. So I am curious what you're hearing in other neighborhoods where there's carriage lots. To get other than factors in here and both in support of the one bill.
The major,
Can I add to that? That's actually the question I had as
Sure,
well.
we'll bundle it
Is that,
together.
you had mentioned that you did get emails from people saying that they did like the requirement that, somebody on the block owns the carriage lot. But you mentioned in the, presentation that there wasn't any, strong rationale besides bias, as far as you understand, for why that restriction could exist. So I'm also interested in, well, surely that's not what the email said, that people had this bias. What were the reasons that they gave?
Okay, that's fair. And I've forgotten your question already. Oh my gosh. What the public comments were on. Mhm.
okay, so to repeat the question, we had sort of two questions. One is what's the feedback that we've heard in other neighborhoods? And then, it's, what was the other one?
The other one was,
Oh,
we
I'm
got
sorry.
comments.
Yes,
We
the-
said, we mentioned comments.
Comments,
And we wondered what those comments, I guess, said about why they wanted to retain the ownership requirement.
so, I have, as everyone has noted, we have not done a substantial amount of outreach in Park Hill, so I've talked to two people in Park Hill. And Shane's one of them, and we had a great discussion, but have not had a chance to hear from many other people, so I'll leave that there, so we all understand. And to the bias question, yeah, of course, people don't say, I want this because I'm biased. They say, someone on our block will take better care of it, someone on our block will be more accountable, someone on our block knows what we're like.
Or I want to buy that lot, and now you're gonna let other people buy that lot. Okay, that's pretty much what we heard. Otherwise, there was a lot of concerns about the future development, intensity of development. Can that be supported on a carriage lot or not? And we've talked, I hope, a lot about that tonight. And the answer might well be no in some cases. You've got a 2,000 square foot or three, and there are some 3,000. I looked tonight before I came, about 3,000. There's some that dip a little below that in Sloan Lake. They get larger in Highland and Colfax area, or the other South Park Hill. They're closer to that 6,000 square foot. So small, medium size lots. Yeah, I mean, the answer in some cases might be too cost prohibitive to build a house on it, whether it's accessory or private, because other codes besides zoning don't look at them differently. It's just a house with a unit in it, and you'll either be able to meet all those other requirements or not. Zoning got you into the door, but not all the way through the house and out the other side.
Question, but not for you, if that's okay. Just curious, because we have maybe one of the few, like undeveloped tiny carriage lots in our house, and at least for me, there's that concern around in the historic district, all our houses are small. What would they really build? How would they get, right? A lot of the stuff that we've all talked about, but at the end of the day, what I really want is more neighbors, right? So like, you can have a really happy neighbor, you can have a great neighbor, you can have one who has you and stress. Ours is like a big lot for like everyone in the house, right? And so I'm just curious, you guys that have maybe more developable spots, right? Like, for me, a lot of what you're saying actually makes me feel better because it's one unit, it's smaller. It has to go through fire, DOT, like all the stuff. Okay, and like, it doesn't sound any worse than anything else on the block, assuming all of that is met. And so it's partly, I guess, if you're like, oh, but what if they find a new home and built like a 3-story ship that's stuck over big enough in my house and you die? But I mean, but like you're saying, 2-story, 1 unit, it has to meet all this stuff. And like, if anyone goes through that much work right now, it actually might be better than the trashy vacant lot.
I'm gonna just,
Okay.
But zoning, I can only build in different tax. So I have, all I'm asking for is, to your point earlier, if someone next door to you has it as a bungalow, you sell it and tear it down the duplex, all I ask for is I go through the exact same document as they do. My lot is treated no different than anyone else's on the block. Because if I'm a resident, you're a resident, we're all residents on the same block, and I really do believe you hear from, you want good neighbors, you want more beautiful block, so common place. No one's gonna build something on this one.
I mean, your problem is something you don't feel like you're happy with someone. Right?
Feel that way.
But like the whole, like it's unfortunate because some of you might have a developable lot that would be an addition. If they brought in more utilities, if they brought in the right, like, sometimes
Okay, but for the people at home, we're not able to hear the conversation, but there is a dialogue going on between members of the audience. Regarding, you know, what's worse, what's better, a vacant lot sometimes can be worse than a house if it's the unknown.
that is partly.
Well, and that is true of me living in my house in Denver as to what's gonna happen next door to me.
I hear you, but the gauntlets that were being described as what these people will go through in order to develop in our specific situation don't seem to be playing out in that fashion.
Yeah, and I will tell you again, they have not submitted for any permits to build anything on that lot yet. And when they do, that will trigger the full scrutiny and it'll either make it through or not. Now they might choose knowing, and I haven't talked to them in months, so I don't know. I think there's an email in my inbox that I'm just behind on. They might choose to wait to see what happens with this amendment, because then they wouldn't need the alley vacation. So I just don't know what they're doing, but I will assure you there is no permit to develop because they're still trying to vacate an alley, and that's where they got to the neighborhood on. That's how they got and why they got to the neighborhood. Now they have plans with a small p to build a house for themselves. And maybe they even shared something with you. I don't know, but there's no official formal development application in the door yet.
We are now coming up on 7:30. It's about 7:20.
7:20.
And thank you all so much for hanging in there, for your patience.
Thank you for those who did the
Please.
hybrid and kept reminding us to repeat questions. Appreciate that. as
Yes.
You followed along.
And please feel free to email me with any comments to the planning board.
You can also send a letter direct to the planning board and we'll make sure it gets
Yes.
there in whatever format you like.
Same way they did us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Landmark.
What if it's not a qualified structure? It still has to be small, that makes me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I think it's fair that the landmark look at it as another